Asalaamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatahu. I'm going to talk about the Sihr of Seperation. This Sihr of Seperation is known as Sihr al-Tafriq, and it's one of the few types of magic that there are, of black magic. It is part of our belief to believe that through Sihr this can happen. It's mentioned in the Quran in Surah Baqarah in one of the ayat where it says, and yet they learn from them, the two angels at Babylon, Harut and Marut, and yet they learn from them that by which they cause separation between a man and his wife, but they do not harm anyone through it except by the permission of Allah. And that is another important thing to remember. I'm always saying this constantly because you have to remember that only through the permission of Allah are these shayateen, these sahir, these evil people, the instigator who did this, are able to cause anything. It's only as a trial by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not, they are powerless without it. So why does this happen? One of the reasons is that for the shayateen, this is an act most beloved to Iblis, and in a hadith it mentions that Iblis on his throne, if a shayateen comes to him saying that I was able to separate a man from his wife, i.e. called separation or divorce, then Iblis praises him. He calls him over, and it's almost like, a pat on the back, well done. And that just shows you how much of an evil act it is, because, and you also have to remember that marriage is, it's a sacred trust between us and Allah, that we will take care of the person that we've married, and everything in our lives is a trust from Allah that we will use well. And marriage is just another one of those things about caring and respecting our spouse. Anyway, so I just wanted to highlight how you might, if you're suspecting that you're going through this kind of sihr, how to know what the symptoms are, what you can do, things that are going to help, and how to cope with it. You may be going through it. I have personally been through it, and I'm speaking on a little bit of advice from some sisters as well who have gone through a similar situation, and I've just asked them for some tips, which inshallah I'm going to include in this video. So if normally it does happen as soon as you've gotten married, newly married, or in the first few months it can occur, but that doesn't mean that it may not happen a bit later on as well. So what would happen is, so say you're newly married and your partner has no interest in you, or they're acting really strange, they may say really rude comments, they may be really aggressive, the comments might be really, really disrespectful, and really, things that they didn't warrant it. So it may be completely out of context. You could just be sitting there and the person, they could start on you basically, or they could say things that will really bring you down, and in one case it was always about the sister's family. So the way that before the sister realized that there's possession going on in this case, she thought it was her husband, and there would be comments about the family, disrespectful comments on the family, about her, about and these things really get to you, and you think that the sad thing is you start thinking that it's your spouse. So then you fall into a kind of depression, and you're thinking, I'm newly married, what's happening? Why is my spouse behaving this way? Have I married this person who seems like such a monster? They have no interest in me, and or what may happen is, if you've been married for a while, then all of a sudden, your spouse has withdrawn from you, they're cold, they're rude, they're all the things that I mentioned, only they weren't like this a while ago. So you've known your spouse to be kind, or you've known them to be interested in you, and now all of a sudden things have completely flipped around. Another thing that may happen is, it may be you. If you are suspecting that it could be you, that why am I not interested in my spouse? Or it may be that you could also, the person or you could experience a dream, and in your dream you may see either a beautiful man or woman, obviously depending on your gender. You may see a beautiful man or woman coming in your dreams and seducing you, or you know, it can go so far as even having sexual relations in a dream, and you wake up and you'd have to have a ghusl basically. You may find it hard to lower your gaze all of a sudden, or you, from the beginning of the marriage, you may find that you are really interested in other women or men and looking at them, and but when you come home to your spouse, you're not really that interested. You may have problems in the sexual relations department as well. For example, you may completely not have any interest in your partner, or you may have interest in your partner, but when you actually try to have relations, there's a blockage. So you may get a headache, you may get a backache, or the woman may be unable to get aroused, or she may have pains in her legs, or her legs are unable to move. There can be actual frigidity. So you may experience things like that. With the part of the relations, that I would say is one of the most telltale signs, because what the jinn do is they cause a blockage so that you're unable to have relations or get close to one another. So what I would say is, if you're experiencing a really tough time at the beginning of your marriage, or you are having most of these symptoms and you are really down and you're confused, and you've tried things, I wouldn't say jump to the assumption that it's sihr straight away, but I would try it out, because especially if you're newly married, it is a very common type of sihr, unfortunately. So at least then you can rule that out. So what you do is you would try some ruqyah on them. So either on yourself, if you feel you're the person going through this, or your spouse. You would get them to listen on headphones. So you put headphones in on a loud volume, you play Surah Baqarah or any of the Ruqyah audios that are available on YouTube, and you look for a reaction. Now the reactions to look out for would be things like if they experience a sudden headache, if they start shivering, if their body starts shaking, so if their arm is quivering all of a sudden, or crying, laughter, if they're telling you to turn it off, if they don't like it, if there's fear, if there's anger, if there's any over emotional reaction, if there's a quickening of the heart, if they start sweating, or if they start feeling cold, then that is likely that they are reacting to the surah. It may be really obvious, it may be a bit slightly obvious, so that will be the way of telling that there's a possibility of sihr. And also another surefire way of knowing that it's sihr would be if you have taweez. It may be that you don't know about the evils of taweez, it may be that you didn't realize. So if you have taweez in the house, or if you were given taweez, or if either of you wear taweez, you need to dispose of them immediately. You can't just throw them away, unfortunately. They do have to be undone. You could take them to a person of knowledge, or if you can get hold of a raqi, you can phone them and tell them, I've got some taweez, I think I've got sihr of the freak. Tell them your symptoms and they will be able to take it further. Or alternatively, if you know a person of religion or a person of piety who can remove the taweez, they can do that for you as well. Or there are videos on YouTube, inshallah I'm going to put them on the site, that show you how to undo taweez. So if you feel that you can do that as well yourself, so please remove those. If when you're listening to the recitation and you start experiencing cramps in your stomach, and these cramps are not there the rest of the time, so say the rest of the time you may feel them but it gets worse, or you don't feel anything, and it's only when you are listening to the Quran and you put it on your headphones, you start feeling a cramp in your stomach or the person, then it may be that you ate it. Again, I don't want anybody to jump to conclusions, but a way of knowing is that if the rest of the time you seem to be okay and you get these symptoms all of a sudden when you're listening to the Quran, then it is likely that it can be sihr and you're reacting to the Quran. So once you've established that it is sihr, which will be either by going to Iraqi, listening to the Ruqyah and things like that, and you've realised that either your spouse is going through something like this, and obviously it's affecting your marriage, ways of handling this, would be firstly to stay calm in the situation. If you've been going through it for a long time and you haven't realized that it's sihr, it could be that you've been, you know, feeling really down for months or even years, without anybody to talk to or to understand your situation. So I would say, now that you know, alhamdulillah, because Allah has revealed to you the nature of the situation, and now you can do something about it. So stay calm. You're going to need a lot of patience with your spouse. Seek the help of Allah and ask for patience, and keep your connection close with Allah, so that you remember you're not alone in this situation, because you're going to need patience to deal with your spouse. In Sihr of the Freak, the person is likely to be possessed, and it is the jinn within the body that will be the one who is acting aggressive, who is being violent, who is the one who will be swearing at you, all these nasty things. And unfortunately, due to the lack of knowledge, there are loads of cases out there where people have divorced and they did not know that it was because of the nature of something like this, or they knew that they had sihr done on them, but because of the lack of either patience or understanding, the other spouse was not able to handle the situation, and they did end up in divorce. And that's really an unfortunate case, brothers and sisters. And I want you to think to yourself, while you're going through this, if it is sihr, then if I leave now, if they got better, how would I know what they would have been like? You know, you have to remember now, I'm going to tell you one of the biggest ways of dealing with this is to imagine that it's almost like a split personality. Because what happens is, when your spouse says things like this, and you know, they're swearing, or they're acting out, or he leaves all day, or you know, he's looking at other women, or vice versa. If it's the wife, she doesn't listen to you, and she's shouting and she's rude, and it's very likely that at those times, if you were to ask them at the later time, they will not have any remembrance of it whatsoever. They have no idea what you're talking about, and that is because it was the jinn acting out in their body, trying to fool you that it's the person. So it's like a game. So they will go into the body, they were acting this way, you two argue, and they successfully manage to separate the husband and the wife. So, you know, for me, in my case, because it happened a few months after the marriage, I was able to get an idea of how my husband was before the situation got this way. So I had like a comparison. So I knew, my husband does not act this way, why is he acting this way now? So when he was saying those kind of things, or if he was really aggressive, or if he was not able to pray and he didn't want to listen to Quran all of a sudden, I was able to make that distinction that, okay, this is not my husband, and that's what you need to do. If you have something to compare it to, like how he used to be in the past, you're going to have to constantly remind yourself that this is who my husband was, and this is not my husband or my wife at the moment. If you didn't, I'm going to have to say to you to just take it easy, and to realize you're still going to have to realize that it's not that person, because if you don't, you're going to get upset, you're going to be always crying, thinking that it's your spouse, when really it's just this jinn who's actually probably having a good time bringing you down, and they don't care about your feelings. And if you are getting upset, the jinn are not bothered, because that's how they will break up your marriage. And in one case that I heard, the sister, she did actually get upset with the husband when it wasn't him, and she was speaking to the jinn, and she turned around and said, I will leave the marriage, and it smiled. So that's how they feel about it. Don't make the job easier. That is what they want. So don't take their comments to heart. I would say, if they say something really spiteful, or if something really aggressive happens, or if they've stayed out for a long time, when they come back, don't get aggressive, don't get upset. Just remember, it's not them. So speak to them kindly, and always speak kindly and calmly, because if you get aggressive or overly emotional, you can spark a reaction out of them even more, and they're less likely to listen to you, and they're more likely to not do their ruqyah and to argue. So the next thing I would say is, imagine that it's not your spouse at those times. Keep that in the forefront of your mind. Start to learn the subtleties in the jinn's behaviour. So watch your partner and start to realise, because it may be at times where, especially if you start the ruqyah, there's going to be times where your spouse is getting better and they're feeling better and they're acting better, and then you can start to compare what are they like then and what are they like when it's more like acting like the jinn. And this is something that comes from experience. This will help you, because then you will know if it's your partner or if it's a jinn. So basically it's like the jinn is surfacing. So at times, depending on how much ruqyah you do, the more ruqyah you do, the lower the symptoms get and the less likely the jinn is to surface, and the more likely is going to be your partner. So if you're doing a lot of ruqyah, then your partner is going to be more in control of themselves, and they're more likely to be themselves through the day. The jinn is less likely to speak out, and it will just be in the body. If you're not doing that much ruqyah, then the jinn are able to surface. If you're not doing any ruqyah, then obviously that's when it's the worst, because they have free reign, if you like. So the jinn will be speaking all day, they'll be talking all day. That's when the person isn't praying and they don't want to pray, and they don't listen to any ruqyah, because it's the jinn basically running from doing anything to do with the Quran, because it will burn it. So depending on how much ruqyah you do will depend on how much you see more of your partner, basically, if you like. That doesn't mean that even if you do a lot, that they will get 100% better in a day. So I want you to understand that at times the person will be in control and at other times they won't. It's basically possession. To understand, to help you understand, you will have to speak to your spouse a lot to get an idea of what is going on when they're okay. Obviously it depends on how severe the case is, because if they're bad, it may be that they don't even want to sit around you or near you, never mind talk to you. So in those cases, you're just going to have to let them do more ruqyah. So how do you help them with the ruqyah? You just prompt them. So just constantly, every now and then, just give them a reminder to do a little bit of ruqyah. If you have somebody in the family who they respect, if it's a man, it may be harder, if it's aggressive, to ask them to do ruqyah. If they have somebody in the family who they do listen to and they do respect, you can ask for their help. So just getting them to sit down and listen to some Quran, at least the 45-minute ruqyah audios on the YouTube, and then maybe have a break and then do some more in the evening, especially doing more after Maghrib, and during Maghrib time, because Allahu alim, but from what I've seen, things can get worse around Maghrib time. So do try and do some more, and especially your evening dhikr. And if you're the person who you feel like you're out having outbursts with your spouse, I was just reading on an article, case of a sister, and she was asking for help because she said she would start getting violent and abusive with her husband and her child for no reason whatsoever, and she couldn't control it. So if you feel it's you, my advice to you is that it is up to you to change your situation. It's completely in your hands. There's no such thing as you can't control it. If you feel like, if you start using the excuse, I'm not in control, it's a jinn, or what am I going to do? If you act defeatist, it will continue and things do get worse. People do go through this for years, and there are cases where people have ended up in divorce, and it's your life, and it may sound like harsh advice, but I'm giving honest and true advice, because if you don't help your situation, it can end up in divorce, it can end up in getting worse, and the last thing you want is to let the jinn have free reign in your body. So you know, it's really not a joke. Take it seriously. At the same time, don't stress. Don't think on it all day. Just act on your ruqyah. So listen to the ruqyah audios, read on the water and drink, and despite what you're feeling inside, because what the jinn will try to do is try to ignite anger in the person so that they act out to either their husband or their wives or somebody in the family, and it may be completely out of nowhere, or it may be out of something small. So what you have to do is try to control that emotion, think and fear Allah, and try to talk to them in a polite manner. So you may have a boiling rage inside your body, but speak to them politely. And then inshallah what you see is, because the jinn is not getting a reaction out of you, because they're not letting you because you're not letting them act out from your body, then inshallah that anger will slowly subside. I do say slowly because it does take some time. So also do that. If you feel like you don't want to be around your spouse, just force yourself to sit next to your spouse for a little while, and those feelings will start to go, because what you want to do is you want to do the opposite of what they're prompting you to do, so that then you're fighting against it. So inshallah, combine this with your ruqyah and spend time with your spouse. Try not to argue. If you do find yourself falling into argument, and after doing ruqyah for a few weeks then you have a really bad day and you have a really bad argument, or you know, you left the house or something really terrible happened, don't despair. Things will be up and down. On some days you will just feel worse than other days without even realizing why. If you have one bad day, it doesn't mean that everything you did before is completely cancelled out and you have to start all over again from scratch. Alhamdulillah, it's still, you can just carry on. You're still recovering and you're still healing, inshallah. So make dua, and I pray that you all get a cure. If you have any more tips and advice for other people, if you've gone through this yourself, or if you know somebody who is, anything that helped, just send us an email or a message and inshallah I'll include it. Asalaamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatahu.